if your ambition isn't making you successful, but making you impossible to satisfy. The Tao Te Ching was written as a manual for administrators, not monks in caves, and one of its warnings about ambition is so precise that it maps directly onto the exhaustion most high achievers feel by Wednesday afternoon. By the end of this story, you'll know the exact difference between ambition that builds and ambition that consumes, and you'll have one concrete test to run on your own calendar this week. The modern obsession with more. You've chased the promotion, the raise, the next 10,000 followers, and the optimized morning routine that'll finally make you the person you're supposed to become. The targets are real, the work is real, and the achievements arrive. But something happens in the 48 hours after you reach them. The satisfaction peaks, then flattens, then vanishes, and the finish line reappears farther ahead than it was before you started. You're not imagining this. The pattern is older than capitalism, and it's got a name that most productivity blogs will never mention. Psychologists call it hedonic adaptation, which means your brain resets its baseline the moment the new status becomes normal. The corner office feels like an office within 3 weeks, and the follower milestone becomes a floor instead of a ceiling. You stop celebrating and start calculating, but this isn't just a brain chemistry trick because something deeper is happening. Your achievements are slowly merging with your identity until they're no longer things you've done, and eventually they become who you are. Think about the last time you hit a milestone that actually mattered to you. Maybe it was a revenue number, a title change, or a launch that consumed 6 months of your life. You marked it, you announced it, and you felt the spike. But by Monday morning, you were already measuring the distance to the next one. The finish line moved while you were still crossing it. You didn't fail to enjoy the win. The system you're running was built so that wins are never destinations. They're only fuel for the next chase. Here's what most people miss about this moment. You're not weak for wanting more. The wanting isn't the disease. The problem is that your ambition has no endpoint built into it, which means it can't rest, and a mind that can't rest will eventually treat every accomplishment as a stepping stone rather than a moment of arrival. This isn't a modern invention. Lao Tzu saw the exact same pattern in the administrators and rulers of ancient China, and he wrote a warning about it that still gets misread today. In chapter 9 of the Tao Te Ching, he wrote, "Fill your bowl to the brim and it'll spill. Keep sharpening your knife and it'll blunt." He wasn't talking about moderation in the way your parents talked about eating dessert. He described a structural law. The more you obsessively pursue any single goal without pause, the more you dull the very capacity that made the pursuit possible. The bowl doesn't spill because it's clumsy. It spills because fullness is a real physical limit, and ignoring limits isn't ambition. It's a form of blindness. The moving finish line isn't a metaphor. It's a lived experience that shows up in your calendar, your body, and your sleep. You reach the number, and the number changes. You earn the title, and the title reveals a higher title. You buy the thing, and the thing becomes the baseline for the next thing. Every achievement is real, and every achievement is immediately downgraded by the mind that generated it. This is the architecture of ego-driven ambition, and it operates under a simple rule: nothing is ever allowed to be enough. By Wednesday afternoon, the exhaustion sets in, and it's not the exhaustion of hard work. It's the exhaustion of a person who's been pulling a finish line forward for years without ever being told that the line is attached to their own collar. You're not running toward something because you're running away from the possibility that where you are right now might already be sufficient, and that possibility terrifies the part of you that's built an identity out of constant motion. This is where Lao Tzu enters the story, and he doesn't enter it as a mystic. He enters it as a man who watched rulers bankrupt their kingdoms, destroy their health, and alienate everyone around them because they couldn't stop reaching. His warning isn't about laziness, and it's not about giving up. It's about a specific mistake that high achievers make every single day without knowing they're making it. They confuse the ambition to build with the compulsion to consume. Lao Tzu's warning. The year is roughly 517 BCE, and the text we call the Tao Te Ching is circulating among the administrators of small kingdoms who are trying to govern wisely while surrounded by war. This isn't a book for monks retreating from the world. It's a manual for people who hold real power, manage real resources, and face real pressure to produce results. Lao Tzu worked as an archivist who'd watched decades of rulers chase expansion, conquest, and glory until their own ambition consumed the very stability they were trying to create. So when he warns against ambition, he's not warning against building, because what he's actually warning against is the attachment to ambition itself, and that distinction matters more than almost any other in the entire text. Most modern translations bury it under soft language about flow and letting go. Healthy ambition builds things, develops skills, and creates value that outlasts the person who made it. Ego-driven ambition consumes things, including the person running it, because its only goal is the next hit or validation. Think about the difference in your own work. There's the project you pursued because the problem genuinely interested you, and there's the project you pursued because it'd look impressive on a resume or generate a specific number you could post. The first one leaves you sharper, the second one leaves you hollow even when it succeeds. One is aligned with what you actually value, the other is aligned with what you think will make you valuable to other people. That gap between the two is where attachment lives, and it's the exact gap Lao Tzu was trying to name. He describes this in the concept of Wu Wei, which isn't passivity no matter how many meditation apps misuse the term. Wu Wei is the absence of forcing. The action is real, the movement is real, and the work is real. But there's no longer a gap between the actor and the action. No self standing behind the movement, watching it and trying to control the outcome. The cook who finds the joint in the bone doesn't hack through it with more force. He feels where the blade wants to go, and the cut takes a fraction of the effort while producing a better result. This is why Lao Tzu ranks self-knowledge above every external skill. In chapter 33 of the Tao Te Ching, he writes, "Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power." Read that again, because the hierarchy is deliberate. He places self-knowledge above external knowledge and self-mastery above domination. The ambitious person who spends all their energy reading competitors, managing perceptions and climbing hierarchies is intelligent and strong by his definition, but they're not wise and they're not powerful in the way that endures. True power turns inward first. Chapter 44 makes the warning even sharper. Know when to stop and you'll never be in danger. This isn't about quitting. It's about building an endpoint into your ambition so that your ambition doesn't become a runaway process. The ruler who can't stop conquering eventually runs out of soldiers. The professional who can't stop optimizing eventually runs out of health. The creator who can't stop producing eventually runs out of ideas. The danger isn't the ambition itself, because the real danger is the absence of any stopping condition, and without one, the pursuit becomes a runaway process. So here's the reframe that changes everything. Lao Tzu isn't asking you to want less. He's asking you to want cleanly. He's asking you to know whether your ambition is building something that'll stand without your constant maintenance, or whether it's consuming you to produce a number that'll feel like nothing in 3 weeks. The difference isn't about scale, it's about direction. One moves outward and leaves real evidence behind, while the other moves inward and leaves nothing but debris and exhaustion in its wake. Most high achievers have never been taught how to tell these two apart, and the cost shows up in places they don't expect. It shows up in the insomnia that arrives after the launch succeeds. It shows up in the inability to take a full weekend off without checking metrics. It shows up in the quiet realization that you've accomplished more than most people ever will, and yet you feel exactly the same as you did before any of it happened. That isn't a failure of gratitude. It's a symptom of ambition without a stopping condition. 4 signs. Ambition has taken control. So how do you know which kind of ambition you're running right now? Lao Tzu didn't just diagnose the problem in abstract terms. He described the symptoms with the precision of a physician who's seen the disease 1,000 times. Here are 4 signs that your ambition has shifted from building to consuming, and each one comes with a test you can run against your own calendar this week. Sign 1 is the most obvious, and because it's obvious, most people mistake it for normal. Nothing ever feels like enough. You hit the revenue target, and the revenue target immediately expands. You finish the degree, and the next credential appears in your mind before the ceremony ends. You reach the weight, the follower count, or the ranking, and the satisfaction peaks at a level so low you can barely feel it. This isn't the natural appetite of a healthy builder, because this is the signature of consumption, and a fire that consumes doesn't care what size the fuel is. It only cares that there's more. Sign 2 is harder to notice because it masquerades as foresight. You can't enjoy the present. Your body is at the celebration, the dinner, the vacation, or the family gathering, but your mind is already drafting the next quarter's goals, rehearsing the next pitch, or calculating the gap between where you are and where you think you should be by now. The people around you can see it before you can, because they notice that you're physically present and mentally absent, and they've started to stop expecting you to be fully there. The test is simple. In your next 3 social interactions, count how many times your mind leaves the room. Sign 3 is the most dangerous because it attacks your identity. Your achievements have become who you are instead of something you do. When someone asks you to describe yourself, you lead with titles, numbers, or credentials. When you imagine losing them, you don't imagine a change in circumstances, because what you actually imagine is a dissolution of your entire self. This is what Lao Tzu warned against when he distinguished between the ruler who governs and the ruler who's consumed by the need to be seen governing. The test here is to write a 1-paragraph description of yourself without mentioning any achievement, title, or metric. If you can't do it, or if the paragraph feels empty, your identity has fused with your ambition. Sign 4 is the one your body reports before your mind admits it. You sacrifice peace for progress, and the trade stops feeling like a trade. You gain more income, more status, and more visibility, and you feel less alive. Sleep becomes a performance optimization problem because rest becomes something you schedule and defend rather than something you naturally fall into. Your nervous system is running a background process of vigilance that never closes because there's always another milestone approaching, and that milestone has become the only proof that your life is moving forward. The test is to ask yourself when you last had a full day where nothing needed to improve. This is why Lao Tzu doesn't just tell you to slow down. In chapter 15, he describes the ancient masters as being like water. They're present, responsive, and they move with the situation rather than driving it. They're not chasing, not calculating, and not rehearsing the next move while the current one is still happening. They're simply there, doing what the moment requires without the constant hum of future-oriented anxiety. Contrast that with the person who treats every conversation as a networking opportunity and every friendship as a potential collaboration. That's not presence, because what it actually is extraction, and extraction is what ambition looks like when it's taken control. If you recognize 2 or more of these signs, you're not broken and you're not lazy. You're running a program that was installed without your permission, and the program tells you that motion is safety and stillness is failure. But here's where the story gets stranger. The solution isn't to slow down, to want less, or to abandon your standards. The solution is to redirect the same energy through a different architecture. Lao Tzu didn't offer a philosophy of retreat, because what he offered was a framework for pursuit that doesn't consume the pursuer. The four signs share a common root. They all emerge when ambition loses its object and becomes its own fuel. You're no longer working toward a specific outcome that matters. You're working to maintain the feeling of working, because that feeling is the only thing that quiets the anxiety underneath. This is why rest feels threatening. Rest removes the distraction, and the distraction is the only thing keeping you from noticing that your ambition has become a closed loop with no exit condition. That recognition is uncomfortable, but it's also the door. The Taoist alternative. The Taoist alternative isn't smaller ambition, it's cleaner ambition, which is the difference between a fire that heats a room and a fire that burns the house down because it forgot what rooms are for. You pursue excellence, you release attachment, you work with purpose, and you rest without guilt. These four practices sound simple because they're simple, but simple doesn't mean easy, and most people will skip them because they don't look impressive on a resume. Pursuing excellence means shifting from the status model to the craftsman model. The status model asks what a project will get you, and the craftsman model asks what a project will make possible. One is about accumulation, and the other is about alignment. When a carpenter builds a table under the craftsman model, he isn't thinking about how the table will look on social media or whether it'll lead to a bigger commission. He's thinking about the grain of the wood, the tension in the joint, and whether the table will still stand in 50 years. That orientation produces better work, and it produces a worker who isn't destroyed by the work. Releasing attachment means building the project you can walk away from without checking constantly, without second-guessing, and without inserting yourself back into the process every 48 hours to make sure it's going the way you want it. Think about the last project you truly let go of. If you're honest, you've probably not done that recently, and you might never have done it at all. We're all Emperor Wu, convinced that the grain prices only fall because we keep watching. The truth is that your intervention isn't always the variable that matters, and learning when your presence helps versus when it becomes anxiety in disguise is the core skill. Working with purpose means knowing why you're in the room before the meeting starts. It means being able to answer the question of what would make this conversation successful in a single sentence that doesn't include the word optics or perception. Most professionals are so busy managing impressions that they forget what they actually want from the interaction, and the result is meetings that produce motion without movement. Purpose is the filter that tells you which opportunities to take and which ones are just distractions wearing ambition's clothes. Resting without guilt means taking the unscheduled afternoon and actually letting it be unscheduled, not turning it into recovery blocks on a calendar app. It isn't strategic downtime to optimize later performance. It's simply stopping because stopping is part of being human, and humans aren't machines that run more efficiently with maintenance schedules. Lao Tzu understood this as ziran, which means naturalness. It's the quality of simply being what you are without performance or agenda. A tree doesn't rest in order to grow faster, because rest and growth aren't two different things, because they're the same process observed at different speeds. In chapter 22, Lao Tzu writes, "If you want to become whole, let yourself be partial. If you want to become straight, let yourself be crooked." This is the paradox of the alternative. The more you grip your ambition, the more it deforms you. The more you let it move through you like a current rather than a possession, the more it can actually accomplish without destroying the accomplisher. You don't need less drive, because what you actually need is drive that knows its own shape and understands where it's going. Here's the one concrete practice for this week. Before you begin any task today, ask yourself one question. Am I doing this to build something or to prove something? Don't judge the answer, because what you need to do is just collect it and keep moving forward without stopping to analyze. Write it down or speak it into a note, and do this for 3 consecutive days. By the 3rd day, you'll see a pattern, and the pattern will tell you exactly where your ambition has shifted from building to consuming. That awareness isn't the end of the work, it's the beginning of it, and it's the only foundation that can support real change. The Taoist framework doesn't promise peace. In the abstract, it promises peace as a byproduct of alignment, which means you stop fighting yourself about what you're supposed to want and start working with what you actually want. That shift is smaller than it sounds and larger than it feels. It doesn't require a retreat to the mountains or a rejection of modern life. It requires only the willingness to look at your own ambition honestly and to notice whether it's building a life you'd want to live in or merely a resume you'd want to be buried with. The Tao teaches that the tree doesn't compare its height to the forest. It simply grows according to its nature. Perhaps success isn't becoming more than everyone else. Perhaps it's finally becoming fully yourself. If this landed for you, drop a comment and tell me where in your life you're currently forcing something that the situation isn't asking for. I read everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.